December 1944. The war was already slipping through Japan's fingers. The empire that once seemed unstoppable was collapsing, city by city, island by island. But on a small base in China, one young intelligence officer refused to see it that way. His name was Hiroo Onoda, 22 years old, proud, sharp-minded, and fiercely loyal. He wasn't a soldier who fought with brute force. He was trained to fight with patience, to blend into shadows, to think like the enemy, to survive when others couldn't. That's why his superiors gave him an impossible order, an order that would define the rest of his life. You were to go to Lubang Island in the Philippines, they told him. Carry out guerrilla operations, destroy enemy supplies, and above all, never surrender. Those 3 words burned into him like fire. Never surrender. He was given no date of return, no plan for extraction, just faith that Japan would win and that he'd hold out until the empire called him home. When he boarded that plane to Lubang, he wasn't scared. He felt chosen. Chosen to serve a purpose that outlived fear, hunger, or doubt. But when his boots hit the soil of Lubang Island, reality didn't feel like glory. The jungle was thick, wet, alive, crawling with insects and echoing with distant gunfire. American forces were closing in fast, and the Japanese garrison there was already fractured, desperate. Onoda was supposed to organize defense, sabotage airstrips, and lead resistance. But most soldiers on the island wanted to surrender. They'd seen too much death, too much hopelessness. Onoda saw that as weakness. He believed surrender was worse than death. If the empire falls, he told one of them, we still fight. That's what soldiers do. But the empire did fall, and he just didn't know it yet. For Onoda, the war didn't end in 1945. It was just beginning, one that would last 30 years. August 1945. Japan had fallen. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were gone. Cities erased in seconds. The emperor's voice trembled across the radio, surrendering for the first time in Japan's history. But deep in the jungles of Lubang Island, Hiroo Onoda never heard that broadcast. His radio was long dead. His supplies were low. His uniform was torn from crawling through mud and branches. But his spirit, unbroken. He still believed the war was raging. He still believed Japan would come back for him. When American troops landed on Lubang, chaos exploded. The Japanese forces were crushed almost instantly, and Onoda was forced into the forest with just 3 other soldiers. For days, they hid in silence, moving through vines, sleeping under trees, surviving on coconuts and rice they stole from abandoned huts. They thought the war had simply moved elsewhere. They didn't know it had ended. A few weeks later, leaflets began falling from planes, paper drifting down through the treetops. The soldiers picked them up and read. The war ended on August 15th. Japan has surrendered. Come down from the mountains. Onoda stared at the words like they were poison. He clenched his jaw. This is enemy propaganda, he said. They want us to reveal ourselves. Don't fall for it. And his men believed him. Because in the chaos of war, loyalty felt safer than truth. Months passed, then years. They built small shelters from bamboo, kept their rifles clean, and patrolled the jungle every morning like it was their duty. Every time they saw local farmers, they assumed they were spies. Every time they heard a distant engine, they believed it was another American patrol. The world had moved on, but inside Onoda's mind, the war never stopped. He was still following orders, still waiting for the empire to return. One of his comrades, Shimada, started to doubt. He whispered, "What if it's true? What if Japan really lost?" Onoda glared at him. "If Japan lost," he said, "our country would send for us. Until they do, we fight." It wasn't stubbornness. It was faith. Faith that duty meant obedience, even when the world changed. And so, for men, lost in time, loyal to a ghost, began fighting a war that had already ended. A war only they believed in. The jungle doesn't care about time. Days meld into each other, green, wet, endless. The sun rises, the rain falls, the insects sing, and the world just keeps breathing around you. For Hiroo Onoda, it became home, not by choice but by duty. Months had turned into years, and still, no word from Japan. No orders, no soldiers, just silence. He and his 3 remaining comrades, Shimada, Kozuka, and Akatsu, built a small camp deep within the trees. They hunted for food, stole from local villages at night, and cleaned their rifles like priests caring for relics. They believed the war had simply gone underground, that someday, soon, Japan would counterattack and they would rejoin the fight. But the world had changed. The Americans had gone home. The Philippines had rebuilt. The locals were farming, living, moving on. Only Onoda's little squad stayed behind, trapped in a loop of orders and memories. Sometimes they found more leaflets, printed letters from Japan, even photographs of families with the words, "The war is over. Please come home." Onoda studied them by the campfire. The paper smelled like ink and rain. "Look at the quality," he said. "The Americans printed these. It's all fake." His men nodded, because believing him was easier than believing the world had left them behind. But faith started to crack. One morning, Akatsu couldn't take it anymore. He wanted to surrender, to see if the leaflets were real. He disappeared in the night, slipping through the vines, leaving his rifle behind. Onoda called him a deserter. For him, that was the ultimate betrayal, worse than death. Months later, they heard rumors through the villages that Akatsu had turned himself in, that he'd gone home. But Onoda refused to believe it. If he surrendered, he told Shimada, then he's dead to us. The 3 who remained, Onoda, Shimada, and Kozuka, became ghosts of war. They hunted by moonlight, avoided plains, and kept track of every bullet fired. And then, tragedy struck. One morning in 1954, almost 10 years after Japan's surrender, Shimada was shot by local soldiers near the coast. Onoda held him as he bled out, whispering, "We're still soldiers, Shimada. We'll finish this for you." He buried him in the jungle, under a palm tree, marking the spot with stones. After that, it was just Onoda and Kozuka, 2 men left fighting for an empire that no longer existed. They stopped counting the years. They patched their uniforms with tree bark. They hunted cattle, thinking they were enemy supplies. And every time they fired a bullet, they wrote it down because every bullet was sacred. Sometimes when the rain was heavy, Onoda would just sit under his shelter and whisper orders to himself, pretending his commander was still out there somewhere. He wasn't insane. He was loyal to the point of breaking. The jungle had swallowed the world, and Onoda didn't even notice. He'd lost his friends, his home, and his time, but not his purpose. And in his heart, the war still raged on. The 1950s became the 1960s. The world changed faster than anyone could have imagined. Japan rose from ruins into neon light. New cities, new cars, new dreams. Children who once hid in bomb shelters were now listening to pop music and watching baseball. But in the middle of the Philippine jungle, Hiroo Onoda still cleaned his rifle, still checked for enemy patrols, still believed the emperor's army would return. He and Kozuka lived like shadows. Their clothes were patched with straw. Their boots were cracked and rotting. They'd lost count of the years, but their faith was untouched. Every morning, Onoda would polish the metal of his rifle until it gleamed. "If the war ever resumes," he told Kozuka, "we'll be ready." Kozuka smiled tiredly. He wasn't as sure anymore. They'd heard rumors, villagers whispering that Japan was now an ally of America, that men had gone to the moon, that the world had moved beyond the war. But to Onoda, it was all part of the enemy's game. The leaflets, the voices, the radios, all tricks designed to lure them out. He refused to believe any of it. Sometimes he'd see helicopters flying overhead, modern, silver loud. He'd hide in the underbrush, clutching his rifle, whispering to himself, "Stay invisible, stay loyal. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Onoda's family had already held his funeral. They'd mourned him, prayed for him, moved on. But his father, even in his grief, left one message with the press. "My son will return when his duty is done." Decades passed. Tourists visited the Philippines, snapping photos on beaches not far from where Onoda and Kozuka still crawled through mud, still waiting for orders. In 1972, nearly 30 years after the war, the jungle finally caught up to them. Local police spotted movement near the rice fields. Shots were fired. Kozuka was hit. He fell, calling Onoda's name one last time before collapsing into the grass. Onoda tried to carry him, tried to save him, but the jungle that once protected them now betrayed them. He buried Kozuka beneath a tree, wrapped in a worn military blanket. And when he stood up, he was the last one left. The last soldier still fighting a war that had ended before television even existed. For the next 2 years, he was completely alone, a ghost haunting a world that had forgotten him. And somewhere out there, a young traveler named Norio Suzuki was about to go looking for him, with nothing but a camera, a smile, and a belief that this impossible legend was real. It was 1974. Japan was a different world now. Skyscrapers, color TVs, bullet trains. Most people Onoda's age were retired, living quiet lives, telling stories to their grandchildren. But in the jungle of Lubang Island, one man still wore the uniform of 1945. He still polished his boots every morning, still planned ambushes in a notebook, still waited for orders that would never come. And halfway across the world, a young Japanese adventurer named Norio Suzuki, just 24 years old, sat in his apartment, reading an old article about a soldier rumored to still be alive in the Philippines. He smiled and told his friends, "I'm going to look for 3 things: Lieutenant Onoda, a panda, and the abominable snowman." They laughed, but he wasn't joking. So he packed a small bag, bought a plane ticket, and flew to the Philippines. No weapons, no orders, just curiosity and courage. For 4 days, he trekked through the humid jungle, following rumors and old maps until he reached a clearing. And there, hidden behind the vines, a man appeared, rifle in hand, eyes sharp, uniform shredded but spotless. Hiroo Onoda. Suzuki froze. He couldn't believe it. This wasn't some wild man. This was a disciplined soldier, standing tall, cautious, watching him like an enemy scout. Suzuki raised his hands and said, "Onoda-san, the war is over. It ended 30 years ago." Onoda didn't lower his rifle. He studied Suzuki for a long time, then finally spoke. "If you are truly Japanese," he said quietly, "prove it." So Suzuki began talking about Japan, Tokyo, schools, music, the Olympics. He showed him photos of his family, a calendar, magazines. Onoda listened, expressionless. "You could have forged these," he said. "The Americans are clever." Suzuki didn't argue. He just smiled and said, "Then let me come back. I'll bring your commander. He'll tell you himself." For a moment, Onoda's guard cracked. His eyes softened. Just a flicker of hope buried deep under 30 years of doubt. He nodded slowly. "If my commander orders me to surrender," he said, "I will lay down my arms." Suzuki bowed deeply, and as he left the jungle, he turned back and shouted, "I'll come back for you, Onoda-san. I promise." That night, for the first time in decades, Onoda stared at the stars and wondered if maybe, just maybe, the war had really ended. But he didn't dare believe it yet. He'd built his life on duty, and surrender still felt like betrayal. So he waited, just as he had for 30 long years, trusting only in orders and in the silence of the jungle. It took months of planning. When Norio Suzuki returned to Japan, he went straight to the media, shouting to the world that Hiroo Onoda was alive. Most people didn't believe him. Some laughed, calling it another myth. But Suzuki didn't care. He was determined. He tracked down Onoda's old superior, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, who was now long retired, working quietly as a bookseller in Japan. When Suzuki found him, the old man froze. He whispered, "He's still alive?" Taniguchi hadn't seen a battlefield in decades. He'd grown old, gray, slow, but when Suzuki showed him Onoda's photograph, standing in that same tattered uniform, his hands began to tremble. He knew what he had to do. So, in March 1974, for the first time in 30 years, Major Taniguchi put on his old uniform and flew to the Philippines. The world's media swarmed Lubang Island. But for Onoda, this wasn't about fame. It was about orders. Suzuki met him again in the jungle. "Onoda-san," he said softly, "your commander is here." For a moment, Onoda couldn't breathe. He thought Suzuki was lying again. But then, through the trees, he saw a familiar silhouette. The posture, the presence, the voice. Major Taniguchi. Onoda dropped his rifle to his side, eyes wide, lips trembling. "Sir, you came." Taniguchi stepped forward, saluted, and said the words that would end 30 years of war. "Lieutenant Onoda, the war is over. I order you to stand down." Silence fell over the jungle. Onoda stood frozen, like he'd been struck. His hands trembled as he reached for his rifle. Slowly, he unbuckled it, then his sword, then the knife he'd carried every single day since 1944. He laid them all at his commander's feet. "Sir," he whispered, voice breaking, "I'm sorry I could not serve better. I have only followed orders." Taniguchi's eyes glistened. He put a hand on Onoda's shoulder and said, "You've done your duty. Japan is proud of you." And just like that, 3 decades of war, fear, loyalty, and solitude ended in one quiet moment beneath the trees. As they walked out of the jungle together, Onoda kept his back straight, his uniform neatly buttoned, rifle slung over his shoulder. He wasn't surrendering out of defeat. He was surrendering out of obedience, the same obedience that had kept him alive all those years. And when he finally stepped into the sunlight, cameras flashed. Crowds cheered, but Onoda didn't smile. His eyes scanned the horizon, as if part of him still didn't believe the war was truly over. Because how do you stop fighting a war when it's become your whole life? All right, picture this. It's 1950. The war's been over for 5 years, but Onoda doesn't believe it. He's deep in the mountains of Lubang Island, sword on his hip, rifle slung over his shoulder, living like it's still 1945. Every rustle in the bushes, he thinks it's an ambush. Every airplane in the sky, enemy reconnaissance. Every radio message, every leaflet dropped saying Japan has surrendered, just propaganda in his mind. Onoda and the few men left with him become ghosts in the jungle. They steal food from nearby villages. They patch their uniforms with bark. They keep their rifles spotless, waiting for the day Japan calls them back to duty. Months turn into years. His men start dying, one by one, some killed in clashes, others lost to the elements. And yet, Onoda refuses to stop. He keeps patrolling, keeps reporting, keeps believing. He writes in his journal, "As long as I live, the war continues." Imagine that kind of conviction or delusion, depending on how you see it. A man so loyal, he literally outlasted the war itself.